All right, so this is lesson 5. And the first slide here is a quick recap of things we talked about yesterday. I know my screen in class probably isn't very easy to see because it's bright out, but I'll be reading through this and you can see it on your screen. So the things on the left are just talking about kind of defining what statistical questions are. And then the things on the right are differentiating between non-statistical questions and statistical ones. Okay? And kind of how you could tweak the question a little bit to make it more statistical. All right. So first of all, on the left-hand side, it says statistical questions are questions that address variability and can be answered with data. Okay. So I'd say the first part of that question is almost the most important, okay, where it talks about it addresses variability. So it's talking about something where there are multiple responses or there's multiple possible responses. Okay. Like I said, if we were to ask one person one question, we can't really compare that data unless we can't compare that answer or that response unless we get others to respond to that. Okay. Or unless we are asking the same person a question about multiple instances of that happening, where we've got variability of data. Okay. A good way to determine if you're asking a statistical question is to ask this: do we need to see the data to answer the question? All right. And when we talk about data, we're talking about more than one data point, not just one. Okay. So let's look at some of these examples along the right-hand side. So a non-statistical question is, what is Leanne's favorite color? Now we're assuming Leanne has one favorite color. All right. The problem with this is that it does not address variability, okay, because it's only one point. It's one answer. All right. But if we were to change the question to what's the most common favorite color in our classroom, okay, this is a categorical answer because colors aren't numbers. Right. But by gathering the data, okay, we can analyze it and group things together so we can then figure out what the most common color is among the classroom. All right. So the first question is non-statistical because it's just one response. But when we ask a group of people, it becomes statistical because now it's something we can analyze. Okay. And from that analyzing, we can then interpret an answer. Second one there. Did anyone select red as a favorite color? All right. Although the question can be answered with data, this question can be answered with a single observation. Statistical questions require looking at all of the data available or a substantial portion for a variable. Okay. So we could look at, and all we have to do is, what they're saying is all we have to do is find one person where red was the answer, and we'd have an answer to that. It doesn't require us to look through all the data. Okay. Now we could change it to say what proportion of people selected red as their favorite color. Now we have to look at everybody. We got to look at all the data in order to get that. Okay. And we would have to know what each data point represented. Okay. Whether it's red or not red. Okay. Last one, what's the airspeed velocity of an eagle? And this one, again, I think this one's a little bit of a trick question because they're saying that this is a non-statistical question because it assumes all eagles have the same velocity. All right. And yes, if you're taking that question in its literal sense, they're asking what is the airspeed of an eagle? I think if we were to read that question, we would be thinking kind of what's the average airspeed of an eagle, all right? But this is something we need to be careful of. When we're asking questions, we need to be specific about what questions we're asking, especially when we're talking about data, because that question is going to lead us around that data cycle, and we need to be backing up our answer when we get to the end with that analyzing of the data and the interpreting of the data. Okay, So I understand their concern as well. So when it comes to data, we got to be a little bit more clear. So their response, I got to move this so I can read it. So instead of just saying, what is the airspeed and velocity of an eagle? They're saying, what is the typical or most common or most extreme airspeed velocity of a European eagle? So they're being very specific about a specific type of eagle, right? And they're talking about what is the typical or most common or most extreme airspeed velocity of a European eagle. Okay. All right. Now, the next two slides actually talk about their hypothetical situations, and there's some questions that are presented that are statistical questions, and I just want to talk about why they are statistical. And then after we go through the ones that are given to us, the examples, I want you guys to try and come up with another one, okay? Another statistical question based on the situation that's being used. So slide number 2, which is scenario number 1, it says your math teacher, Michael Phelps, has just graded your end of year exams. Michael Phelps says that he is not ready to post individual scores, but he will answer statistical questions related to them. Okay, so in other words, he won't answer a question like, what's my grade? Okay. One of your friends keeps asking non-statistical questions, probably asking what their grades are. Okay. Help your friend understand the difference between a statistical and non-statistical question by explaining why the following questions are statistical. So we have an A, B, and a C. A is, how did my class compare to the other classes? Okay. Now, this is a pretty open-ended question, and the teacher could answer this probably pretty vaguely, or could get very specific when it comes to scores. All right. But the teacher does have all the data. So what I like about this question is this question's answer could lead you to another more specific question. All right. But I understand why this is a statistical question, because you have to look at all the data between one class and another. All right, in order to determine how one class did compared to the other. All right. B, what was the percentage of students who earned an A in the class? Okay. I like that question because it narrows down. It tells you kind of, all right, what percentage of the class did really well. And if it's a high number, that probably means the people that didn't earn an A probably got a grade closer to that A. All right. If a very small number of percentage of students got an A, then I might be a little more worried that the grades were lower. But you have to look at all the students who got an A, who didn't get an A, so you can get a percentage. What was the typical score on the multiple choice? All right. Now, again, I think this question's a little vague, and it's somewhat open-ended, because remember back when we did the stats unit, if you use the word typical, you could think, all right, that's the same thing as saying what's the average score, all right? But a typical, when you say typical, you might be saying what score occurred the most, okay? Which in that case, that's the mode, okay? The mode could be a lot higher than the average or a lot lower than the average, so it could be misleading, all right? So I think this question is a little too open-ended. I think the teacher could kind of trick you a little bit with their response on this one. All right, what I want you guys to do, think of another question. Think of another question you could ask. Post it in that open space down there, okay? It can be modeled off the questions that are already written there. I don't mind if you ask a similar type question to what's already written there. But if you think about yourself. If you took a test and you're really wanting to know about the test, think about a question you could ask that could lead, the answer kind of helps lead you toward how the class did or how a group of the class did. Okay. I'll give you guys probably minute and a half, and then we'll kind of take a look at those questions. So you guys at home, you guys in the class, use the Post-it, post some questions down there. See if we can get a handful of them. Again, you can model them off the ones that are already there. No right or wrong answer. Because even if you're posting a question that probably doesn't qualify as statistical, it's good for us to talk about that question. See if you can type a question in. Model it off the one up there. There we go. I'm seeing some pop up now. All right. Let's see what we got here. Did the majority of the class receive a passing grade? All right. Now that's the kind of question I'd be asking. I'd ask that, or I'd say, what percentage of the class failed? Or what percentage of the class got a C or better? All right, so I'd feel a little better after I got that answer. How did my class cover another class? Okay. Again, I think, yeah, similar to how did my class compare to other classes, which is good because it kind of talks about a couple classes compared to one another. What percentage of people missed a certain question? Yeah, I would say there's those certain tests that you take where it's like there's this one or two questions that are going to make or break how you do. And if you know how the class did on those questions, you probably have a better idea as to how you did. What was the percentage of students that got a C? Okay, I like that. What's the average state score? So if it's an end of course test, yeah, I like this from a standpoint of this will kind of make you, it's a good way to gauge how you did once you know your score. So while this doesn't pertain probably to your data is a small part of that big average state score. What's the class average? Yep, I think that's a good one. That's a more specific question than the typical score question. How many kids were willing to take the exam versus how many are not? Okay, yeah, with that end of course test, you're right. Some of those students don't have to take the test, so that does make a difference in the overall scores. What was the percentage of people who got at least an A or a B? Yeah, so that gives you a good idea as to kind of how many people did well. And what was the percentage of kids that got a C and higher? So similar question, just talking about that C or higher grade. Good, very good job. And thank you for everybody that put a question in there and participated. That definitely helps us out in the discussion. All right, we're going to move on to the next slide, which is another scenario. It's scenario number 4. Okay. And this one's a little bit different. Okay. It says Sergey Brin, co-founder of Google, is giving a talk on how people use Google today. Explain why the following are statistical questions that you could ask Sergey. All right, so we're going to go through these 4 questions, then you guys are going to come up with one. So it says, what country submits the most Google searches? All right, so this person, he's got a ridiculous amount of data at his disposal. Okay, Google collects all this information. location, what's being searched for, things that you click on, how long you're searching for things. He has all this data. So if you want to know which country submits the most, you'd have to look at all of the data and kind of compare it. Okay, one country would come out on top. You have to kind of categorize it all into which country each search came from. All right. B, how many results does a typical search return? Okay, so you guys know that sometimes you do those searches and at the bottom there's like only like 1 or 2 numbers at the bottom because your search is a very specific search. And then sometimes you go down there and it's like an infinite number of O's in the Google word because you know that you could just keep clicking through and get more and more. All right. So how many is the typical? I think that'd be a good question. I'm actually curious to what the typical number would be, but I'm sure that's something that they're keeping track of. How many Google searches have there been ever? This has to be yeah. This has to be a big number. But yeah, they're definitely keeping track of that on a daily basis, and I'm sure they're compiling it. They can compile it over time. But again, that data is there. How many links does each searcher follow? So if you search for something, it's kind of like how many links do you click on each time? And I'm guessing it's more than one. But I would be interested to see how many links they click on too. Okay. So what I want you guys to do is think of another statistical question. And Google's worldwide. It's age-wide. Everybody does it. Everybody searches Google. Think of a question that you could ask that would be statistical in nature. Again, it's time. There's a time. It's been going for a long time, so you can talk about a time period. How many billion people are there in the world? 77. So almost one Google search for every 2 people. I mean, I average more than 1 per day. All right, I know you guys got some Google questions. Come on. Let's fill up this open space in the bottom. Give you guys 1 more minute. That's a very specific question. I may be stealing somebody's question, but I saw a stat one time. It was the most Googled person by year. And it was really interesting to see how different the backgrounds were of the people that were Googled most by year. It wasn't, sometimes it was a politician, sometimes it was a sports athlete. Yeah. But it's just the polarizing names of the year.
I think of how much I've used Google as a student and then in my adult life, and I'm like, it wasn't around for my parents and even some of my older siblings.
Yeah.
School would have been tough.
Ms. Roten and I were having talks about this because Google was not the first search to come out. The first one I think was tied to Netscape, which Netscape was like I'm trying to think what Netscape became. I think Netscape actually became Firefox. And then then Yahoo was probably the first really, really big one that like everybody knew about. But then after Yahoo got big, there were like other smaller ones. And the one I remember most is Ask Jeeves.
I do remember Ask
and there was like this picture of a butler next to the search thing, and you were basically asking the butler a question. All right, so let's look at these. In the United States, what's the most Googled thing? And I think it'd be interesting to look at what the most Googled thing is in each country. That would definitely, because it's what interests people changes from country to country. So that I'd be curious about that one in the United States. What are the average searches based on each state every hour? It's a very specific question. But if you were to look at it throughout the day, it would be interesting to see what people Google in the mornings, in the middle of the day, and then afternoon and evenings. I'm sure it changes, and I'm sure we'd be really disturbed by what people Google late at night. How many Google searches are made each day? Yeah, and that'd be interesting to look at throughout a year, like how it changes throughout the year based on what's happening throughout the world. How many people ask for directions from Google a year or per day? A lot. And Google, I think Google realized that early on. There was no Google Maps when Google first started. Have you guys ever heard of MapQuest? It still exists, but nobody really uses it anymore. But at the time, you'd have to go to the website MapQuest, and you used to get turn-by-turn directions. And then I think Google realized, hey, people keep searching for MapQuest. We need to get in on this. And now everybody's playing catch up with Google, including like Apple. How popular was Google when it first came out, and how much has it increased until now? That'd be an interesting graph to look at, like a line graph that shows the number of Google searches from the time it started until now. I'm sure it would look pretty steep at different times. How long does the average search take? I'm sure that's a question that Google asks itself all the time too, to try and increase their productivity. What's the most popular topic Googled in Ohio? Yeah, the most popular topic by state would be a good one. On average, how many people use Google to get answers for their homework questions? More and more every day in quarantine or in our remote learning, probably. Nice. Those are good. Those are all really good. All right. So where we're going from here. Okay, here's where we're going from here. We're going to start compiling some data now. Okay, and we're going to use this data we're compiling, and that's really what your assignment is, which you can start now in class, and you guys can finish over the long break or the long remote asynchronous time. I have an example of what your assignment looks like on the fourth slide, and what your assignment's going to be, and I'm going to show you what it looks like and assign it to you in just a second. I want you guys to find the nutrition labels for 2 snack foods and 1 beverage. Now, appropriate snack foods and appropriate beverages. Okay, I want you to find the labels for those, and I'm going to show you how to do that. And what you're going to do is you're just going to copy and paste them into the document I'm giving you guys. So I did one here, and the one I did, I'm going to actually redo it so you guys can see how I do that. Let's see here. So this is going to be the document, and I'll share it with you guys in just a second. It says snack food nutrition labels. Locate appropriate nutrition labels for 2 snack foods and 1 beverage you enjoy. Google Images is a good place to look. Write the name of the item, then copy their pictures and paste them in the big space provided. We will be using these in lesson 6. So for my snack food number 1, I really like extra toasty Cheez-Its. You guys ever had those? They're phenomenal.
The crunch is good.
Yes. All right. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to do a Google search. Extra toasty Cheez-Its nutrition label. Okay. And when I hit enter, it's going to pull up a search. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to actually click on, instead of all, I'm going to go to images. And when I do that, almost all of these are the extra toasty image labels. You can use any of these. I would try and pick one that's pretty clear. And when I click on it, it pulls up a bigger image on the right. If I right click on it and click copy image, and then I go back to my document, and as long as I'm clicked and that cursor is in that open space, and I click either right click and paste or control V, it should post that in there for me. Okay. Now you need to do two things. You got to write the name of your snack and then post the label in there, because I got to know some of the labels don't show the snack name on it. So I need to know what the two are. Okay. And you got to do this 2 snack foods and 1 beverage. It can be, your snack food can be like sour gummy worms, which would probably be my second one. All right. It can be whatever you really, really like to eat. Okay. Kind of snack food. All right. Beverage could be a Gatorade or a protein drink or an energy drink or juice, soft drink. Okay. All right. Let me get that posted here for you guys. All right. It's called Lesson 5, Nutrition Data. Okay. And you guys, you might be able to get it done before you leave. If you don't, finish it before we meet on Monday. And it is now, should be the first thing on your stream right now. And it's the last thing in week 8. So it's right below our so many questions lesson in the week 8 tab. Okay. So it's a Google Doc, so you can access it anywhere. But I really want you guys to try and get those labels in there. Okay.
Google your 2 favorite snacks.